Hello and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. In today's video, we are going to be reading some of my backlist TBR. If you're new here, one thing that you should know about my backlist TBR is that I am very new to being back into reading. At the end of 2022 is when I really first got into reading, so at the beginning of 2023, I started my very first Goodreads account and I added some books to what is now my TBR. But there are some books on that list that have sat there for an entire year at this point. I added them back in January of 2023 and they are still sitting there now. Now I know that some people have a backlist TBR that is way longer than mine. If you're watching this and you're like, I've got books that I have been wanting to read for 4 or 5 years now or more and still haven't gotten around to it, that's totally fine. Maybe take this as your cue though to look at some of those books that have been sitting there for a very long time and you haven't picked them up, and either just get them off of your shelves or go ahead and commit to reading them. So that's what I have done. I have taken the 4 books that I have been looking at for the past year. Every time I pull up this list on Goodreads, these 4 books have been staring at me. And so now it's finally time to check those off and being able to say that I've read them, or at least attempted to read them. I have Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. This book was so hyped up like about a year ago this time. This was really hyped up. I think it won like a 2022 Goodreads Choice Award. Just in case you haven't heard about this book, it's about 2 people, I believe, that are like friends. Maybe there's some kind of romantic interest there, but I don't know if it ever really pans out. We'll see. But they are like partners to create and design this video game together. I really don't know much about the book other than that. I'm going into it fairly blind. The only thing that I have heard is that maybe the ending might be a little bit sad and that some people are actually disappointed in this, but other people really love it. It seems to be kind of divisive in that way, so I'm curious to see what I will think about it. Next I have Sea of Tranquility. I believe that this was also put on my radar because of the 2022 Goodreads Choice Awards. I think this won for the maybe the sci-fi category, but it's by Emily St. John Mandel, best-selling author of The Glass Hotel and Station 11, which I also have not read. The quick little synopsis of this book says that it's a novel of art, time, love, and plague that takes the reader from Vancouver Island in 1912 to a dark colony on the moon nearly 500 years later, unfurling a story of humanity across centuries and space. Once again, I'm going into this somewhat blind. I did read a couple of science fiction books last year that I really enjoyed, so see what I think about that one. I also like that one because it's kind of short compared to Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is a kind of a chunky little book. So the next one I have is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is an older book, but this was on my list because a person that I know in real life had recommended this to me when I was just kind of like wanting to get back into reading. I, asked a lot of my friends and family in real life, like, hey, can you recommend any books to me? And this was one that they said that they really enjoyed. I know, once again, like, Ruth Ware is a very popular author. I have not read anything by her though, so I'm curious what I will think of this one. The synopsis for this automatically wants to set the bar for this book really high because it says, in this tightly wound, enthralling story, reminiscent of Agatha Christie's works, Lo Blacklock, a journalist who writes for a travel magazine, has just been given an assignment of a lifetime: a week on a luxury cruise with only a handful of cabins. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but obviously Ruth Ware, this is like a mystery thriller, so we'll see, I guess, what I think about Ruth Ware. And the 4th book for this reading vlog is His and Hers by Alice Feeney. Now this one I'm going to be listening to on audiobook. Again, this is a little bit of an older one, so I'm late to the game here, but it came out in 2020, and this is another one that a personal friend of mine recommended. This is another mystery thriller, and I have never read anything by Alice Feeney, so it'll be my first time reading from this author as well. I just finished reading a book in 2023, The Lincoln Highway, that was really fat. It was almost 600 pages long, and I really feel like I need like a palate cleanser, so I think I'm going to start with The Woman in Cabin 10 because I feel like this will be the type of book that's going to be a fast read. You're not going to have to think too much, I have a feeling. So anyway, let me get started reading that and I'll tell you some thoughts once I'm a few chapters in. It's a new day, same outfit. It's wintertime, you guys. I don't think I've left my house in like 3 days, but I did do some reading. So right now I am finished with part 1 of The Woman in Cabin 10, and I don't know how I feel about it yet. I was really feeling chapter 1 and like the beginning of chapter 2, and then the book kind of went sideways, and I was like, is this more of like a psychological thriller as opposed to like a mystery? And then the little blurb that I told you guys about where they compared it to Agatha Christie made me feel like, what is happening? So it lost me there for a couple chapters with what was going on. Basically, the main character, Lo, in the very first chapter, she has an intruder in her home. I don't want to spoil anything in this vlog. By the way, this is a spoiler-free reading vlog. I should have probably said that at the beginning. But there is an intruder in her home right off the bat, and she is also in a relationship that has some complications. So there was all of that kind of going on. When she boarded the cruise ship, I kind of got excited because we started getting introduced very briefly to some new characters, and I thought, okay, these are going to be like all the different characters of some sort of mystery type of plot. Here was where we're going to get some more of like the Agatha Christie references and being introduced to a variety of new characters. Then that just kind of stopped. I don't know. There's a lot going on in like less than 50 pages here, and to the point that I'm not sure what direction this author is planning on going with this book at this point. Okay, I have good news and bad news. Good news is Mizzou won last night. Cotton Bowl champions, baby. The bad news is that I'm really still not enjoying this book. I am about halfway through at this point, and I just don't think that this book understands what it wants to be. I don't think that Ruth Ware really knew what direction she wanted to go with this, so it's kind of all over the place. There are two very distinct tones throughout this book, and it can literally be on the same page where the tone shifts between psychological thriller vibes and like a true Agatha Christie whodunit reminiscent type of mystery, like a true mystery. It's very repetitive in that like she might be an alcoholic, she might just be going crazy, she might have some sort of mental health issues. That's like the main gist of her internal dialogue throughout the entire book so far. The only thing that I will say, the only thing that's probably kept this from being a DNF for me is there are these little pieces in between each of the different parts. Like the book is broken up into, I don't know, I think like 8 or so parts. And in between each of the parts, there's like a mixed media of some sort. Sometimes it's emails, sometimes it's text messages, sometimes it's like newspaper clippings, and it's all from like a future timeline. The other good thing it has going for it is it's a pretty fast read, even for a slow reader like me, so I should be finished with this within another day or two, and I'll tell you my final thoughts then. I have quite a few updates for you. So first of all, if you hear a noise in the background, it's the dishwasher running. It's making like this weird noise in this part of the cycle that it's on right now. I finished The Woman in Cabin 10, and let me just say it felt dangerous to read this book because the plot holes were so big I could have fallen straight through them. I don't know. It's a 2-star for me. I did like the last 50 pages or so. I felt like the pacing just picked up and there was less repetitiveness. It just like felt like more things were happening, but at the same time there were like quite a few more plot holes at the end, and I was left with lots of questions. Like, I don't know. I don't want to spoil anything, so I would say if you are somebody though that likes Colleen Hoover books, I know that she is a very popular author. I read Verity by her, and I would say that like the writing style is a very similar comparison. So if you liked Verity by Colleen Hoover, this might be a good thriller option for you, or vice versa. If you've read this one and you haven't read Verity, you might like that one as well. Not for me. We're gonna go ahead and move on. So I've actually started on 2 more of the books for this vlog. I started listening to His and Hers by Alice Feeney. I am only about 19% of the way into this one. So far I can tell you that it is reading much more like just a true thriller at this point, like a domestic thriller type of situation, because obviously the his and hers, the two main characters are male and female that have had some sort of relationship before. I really like the pacing. I think it's giving just enough of like that backstory to the characters, but at the same time like keeping the pace going like you would expect for a thriller to do. Don't really want to get ahead of myself because I'm only 19% of the way in, but there's that. And then I also started reading Sea of Tranquility, and this is a completely different vibe from the two thrillers that we started off with. At the beginning of this book, it's set in 1912, and we've got the main character, Edwin, who is a young man who has kind of loosely been like exiled from England, from his like royal upbringing, and he's now in Canada. It's kind of reminding me very loosely of The Alchemist, just like a young man kind of on this journey in an unknown territory, and he's kind of trying to find himself and figure his life out at this point. That's what's happened so far. It's been focused on Edwin. I think it's also like a good comparison to The Alchemist just in this very beginning part with like how succinct the writing is. It's just very like straight and to the point. Not a ton of detail, but just enough detail that you can fully grasp, you know, everything that's happening. I like it so far, and it's just at the end of this very first part with Edwin, it has gotten into like this sci-fi situation. Some weird stuff is starting to happen, so I'm really excited to see what the second part will entail. We're jumping from 1912 and Edwin's story to 2020, and it says Mirella and Vincent, so I'm assuming that we're going to jump to a whole different, I don't know, space and time, who knows. And so I'm really excited about this one and the direction that it's going and the way it's started off so far. I'm not sure if I will finish His and Hers and Sea of Tranquility before I update you guys again, or maybe, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, and I'll just update you when it feels right to do that. Since my last update, and I have finished both the Sea of Tranquility and His and Hers. I think first let me talk about Sea of Tranquility. This is one of those types of books that could really kind of go in either category, sci-fi or like a literary, or like maybe even like a speculative fiction. I almost tend to say that this is more of like a literary fiction but with some sci-fi elements, because I just think that like the overall tone of the book and the overall kind of message and theme of the book is more like a literary fiction novel would be. You're basically following three main people: Edwin in the early 1900s, and then Olive later in like the 2000s, and then even later still is Gaspari, who is this like time travel investigator investigating this kind of like glitch that happens where all three of those characters have this moment that they all share together. There is like a little bit of a surprise towards the end. Like, I didn't fully put all of the things together. This book plays with kind of like your sense of time and space and your sense of reality and what's real and what's not. And I like the way that all the characters connected, and it talks about, you know, kind of like that need that we have as humans to feel connected to others and to do the right thing for the sense of humanity and the people that we love and care about. This isn't quite like a 5-star read for me. I would call this more of probably like a 4 for me. The only thing that lost me a little bit was Gaspari's character and like the whole investigation piece. So like none of this is a spoiler. It's all in like the little synopsis in the front of the book. Basically, he's hired to investigate this anomaly that happens in the forest that kind of ends up connecting all of the characters together. But like there's a lot of talk about this Time Institute that does the hiring for him. Basically, it's his sister and like a best friend that work there, and there's a lot of talk about like confidential and the confidentiality of what they're working on and all this secrecy, and the word confidential is thrown around a lot. But then his sister and best friend just like start spilling the beans for virtually no reason, just because he asks like, well, what are you guys up to? What is this about? And please let me be a part of it. And they're just like, okay, we'll train you for 5 years and then we'll send you out to investigate this. But like there's no really it's not really clear like what kind of knowledge they're trying to get from this investigation or how it's going to help anybody. So I think that part fell pretty flat for me. I really like the writing style, like I said earlier, how like succinct and to the point this is. There's not a lot of fluff in here, but there's still like a decent amount of character development for all the different characters, at least as much as you can get in like such a short book, because it's only 250 pages. So overall, I enjoyed it, and it's a 4-star for me. Now his and hers, on the other hand, I would say that is a very true thriller. I mean, it checks off all the boxes that you would want in a really good thriller. I gave it a 4.5 star. For me, the ending got a little too twisty and turny. I've heard this about Alice Feeney before, that she really likes not just one plot twist or 2 or 3. She'll throw a whole bunch of them at you. And towards the end, it was like super fast paced at the very end, which you want out of a good thriller. But it was almost like too twisty at the end. It was like almost just a little too much. That was my only really downside to this book. I will say though, it's probably not a thriller that I would like highly recommend to people. Even though I enjoyed it and gave it a 4.5 stars, thought it was a really well written thriller. It checks off great character development, really, you know, interesting twists. It keeps you guessing the entire time. She throws so many red herrings at you that you could easily at some point in the book think like, oh, maybe it's this person, and have a pretty valid explanation for why it might be that person. So she really does keep you guessing, I think. Pacing was really good. I liked the, you know, balance between getting enough backstory from the characters to make what ends up happening plausible, and it felt really real. The relationships between the characters felt realistic to me. That being said, there are a lot of trigger warnings to be aware of. So if things like child loss or divorce or like messy relationships or, you know, bullying and abuse, sexual abuse, like if those things are triggers for you, this is not going to be the book for you. If those aren't things that you want to read about, you're not going to enjoy this book. So I don't know that I would highly recommend it as a thriller, but I do think it was really well written and she did a great job. I enjoyed the writing style. There really wasn't anything that I disliked about this, other than some of the things that happened to the characters and even some animals that were uncomfortable to read about. But like I said, she did a great job of making it make sense and feeling really real and true to the characters in the story. So well done by Miss Alice Feeney. And now I'm going to pick up Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. I don't know, did I save the best for last? I'm going to start reading this one and I'll tell you what I think after I'm a few chapters in. I'm about a third of the way done with Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. And let me just say, like, this book took me a little while to get into it. At first, I would say like the first 20 pages at least, maybe 20 to 30 pages, I was like, is this kind of boring? Is it a little bit like overwritten? I stuck with it, and by about 50 to 75 pages in, I was so immersed in this story that I forgot that I was reading. Like, it's that type of book where you get so into it that you are there and you are experiencing these things with these characters and you totally forget that you're even reading a book. That's the vibes that I'm at now. So it's like I've gone from one extreme to the other. There's a lot of late 80s, early 90s like nostalgia for the video games that they play and they're into, and just kind of the time period that this is set in overall. It's basically following two main characters, Sam and Sadie, who are childhood friends, or so it seems, but there was kind of like some messiness surrounding their initial friendship. I don't want to spoil anything, but basically one of the characters felt like they were slighted by the other when they were children, and so they stopped talking and they meet back up for the first time when they're in college, kind of reignite their friendship. And it was just kind of like a really beautiful story of their friendship. It's not a perfect friendship. There's definitely like some rocky things. There's some differences in their personalities, but they begin building this video game together. I'm enjoying it at this point. Potentially my first 5-star of the year, but I don't know. I don't want to get my hopes up too high. Maybe I'll do another check-in in another 100 pages or so, or I might just wait until I'm finished with it. Like I said, I kind of like fall into getting really immersed in this and then just reading chapter after chapter and never wanting to stop. We'll see how it goes. I want to interrupt this reading vlog to say that after I had already started recording this video and chosen all of the books for this reading vlog, I saw that there is a YouTuber named Leandra. Her channel name is Leandra The TBR Zero. She is hosting a month-long TBR-a-thon for the month of January. She has put together several different beautiful graphics and different ways to participate in this TBR-a-thon. And the one that I thought was probably going to be simple for me, since I was kind of joining in late, would be the TBR-a-thon bingo board. All of the books that I'm already reading for this reading vlog can fall under one of these categories. For example, I think Sea of Tranquility would go great for the blue cover in the B column. In column I, we have I Think, Therefore I Am, first person point of view. So that's the woman in cabin 10 is written in the first person. We have Nice to Meet You, a new to you author at the bottom of column N. Really any of the authors fall in this category for me, but I think I would use like maybe His and Hers by Alice Feeney for that category. And then Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, I don't know, maybe glowing reviews, 4.0 plus rating on Goodreads. That one has a really good high rating over there. So anyway, I thought that was really fun. I just wanted to leave her information in the description box down below. It's still not too late because this is a TBR-a-thon that goes for the entire month of January. So anyway, I just had to share that, continue on with the reading. And just like that, I have finished reading Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. It actually felt like I have been reading this book forever. It feels like a very long book. It's almost 400 pages, so that is no small feat, but it's not the longest book I've read either. I don't know, I do think it kind of dragged on in the middle just a little bit. I think a good way to sum this up is that the parts of it that were done well are like super memorable. For instance, my favorite character is actually Sam and Sadie's kind of mutual friend. He's Sam's roommate in college and then becomes like a producer for the video game company that Sam and Sadie start and design video games together for. His name is Marks, and he is my favorite character in this novel. And actually, I think the most memorable chapter for me was one that was told from his perspective. It was actually told as like the second person POV, so everything was like, you are doing this, you are doing this, now you see this, now you're hearing this. But I mean, told a lot more beautifully and a lot more detail than that, but you get the picture. Which actually gave it the feel as if you were like playing a video game, kind of that same like, you know, you are the main character. Marks is the main character. He's main character energy, which again, if you've read the book, you kind of know that like he gets referred to by Sam when they have like a conflict in their friendship. Marks gets referred to as an NPC, like a non-playable character. And I don't know, I really, really loved that chapter in particular and thought it was really beautifully done. Some of the other chapters though, I think just dragged a little bit for me. It's a lot about like video game production and the creative process of designing and creating and testing out video games, and then kind of what happens after it launches, and you know, receiving public criticism and feedback, and kind of like the messiness that business partners can go through, especially when they're really good friends. Like trying to mix friends and business doesn't always work, especially when you have two people that are like as set in their ways as Sam and Sadie. I almost wish that we would have seen more growth with them. And the other critique I think that I would have for this is that there were a lot of different like kind of controversial or hard-hitting social topics. We talked about class, we talked about racism, we talked about women in the entertainment industry, we talked about women in the tech industry, we talked about races in certain industries, mental health, we talked about people with disabilities. I mean, the list can go on and on. I'm sure I'm forgetting some really key like topics and themes. Like there were a lot of really valid, important topics being talked about in here. But I think what happens is, like I said, like I'm kind of forgetting what some of those even were because we were, you know, so many of them were thrown at us. I just think it could have been edited down a little bit and focused more on, you know, a smaller handful of those rather than like all of these different topics that we're talking about all within less than 400 pages. You know, I think that would have been a little bit more successful in some of the points that they were trying to make there. But overall, she is a beautiful writer. This is really smartly written. I think upon a reread, you're going to be able to pick out lots of different like Easter eggs and little pieces of information that upon second read, you're going to know what's coming ahead, because I think she dropped a lot of those little things throughout the book, but you know, just reading it once, it's hard to catch all of those. Anyway, overall, I think this is probably a 4-star for me. That means we are officially finished with this reading vlog. We did not get a 5-star in this video. We got close with his and hers. They listened to an audiobook, which is a 4.5. And tomorrow, Sea of Tranquility were both 4 stars. Woman and Kevin 10 was a 2. So overall, like, I'm not mad about it. I think it was a pretty good time. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned if you want to see my next video, which can be like part 2 of this TBR-a-thon. If that sounds fun to you, then stick around and I will see you again next time. Thanks for watching.